Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a slightly different video for you guys. I'm going to do a team recommendation video for Master League Premier, which I'm really excited about. I don't usually make these types of videos because I usually like to try out all of the teams that I have in mind before recommending them to you guys. But I've been working really hard on this list of teams, and I hope that these work out for some of you. Let me know if they do and if you try any of them. But keep in mind, these are teams that, on paper, they seem like they will be really good, and PvPoke was giving me really good ratings for them. Maybe in practice, we might see a slightly different meta than the one I am anticipating, and we'll see. Just keep in mind, I am going to make some team recommendations, but the meta we see when we actually play might be different. A lot of the teams that I'm going to recommend are a little bit weak to Magnezone, so we'll have to see how many Magnezones we actually see in the meta. But one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is the fact that there are so many new Pokemon in the Master League Premier meta that we can use. Like, there's Baxcalibur. I didn't really recommend any teams with Baxcalibur because I don't have one, and also I don't think a lot of people are going to have it. If you do, that's really impressive. But also Annihilate, Feraligatr. Feraligatr is one that I really wish I had, but I don't have a hundo. I have an Annihilate, and I have a Golisopod, and I'm really looking forward to using the Golisopod. Also Skeledirge, that's another new one. So that's enough from me. Let's get into these teams. I have quite a few to go over today. Alright, the first team I'm going to recommend is Gyarados with Skeledirge and Metagross in the back. Skeledirge is going to be your safe swap, and I put these on the team together because you have Gyarados, which is kind of like your dragon type, and then you have two answers to fairies in the back. Skeledirge and Metagross are going to be very good against the fairy types, and I don't know if we're going to be seeing a lot of double fairy teams, but I remember the last time Master Premier was around, we did see a lot of double fairy backlines. But the reason I put Gyarados on this team and not Dragonite is because if I put Dragonite, then the team would be very weak to Hisuian Avalugg, and I have a feeling Hisuian Avalugg is going to be everywhere. The team's already kind of weak to Hisuian Avalugg, but at least Gyarados isn't going to be taking double super effective from the Powder Snows. It is going to be taking super effective from the Rock Slides, however, so you have to watch out for that, but you are going to be able to hit back with the Aqua Tails at least. So that's one team, and PvPoke here gives it a rating of A for coverage, A for bulk, B for safety, and A for consistency. You can see that the biggest core breaker for this team is going to be Gyarados itself, and also Hisuian Avalugg. Metagross is going to be destroying Hisuian Avalugg, but Gyarados and Skeledirge, they're not going to have the worst matchup against it. You are going to be able to hit for neutral at least with the Skeledirge, and like I said, Gyarados is going to have a water type move for the Hisuian Avalugg. Remember, it is part rock typing, so it is going to be taking super effective from water type moves. I would run the Gyarados on this team with Dragon Breath because opposing Gyaradoses are going to be core breaking the team the most, and I would use Skeledirge as a safe swap to draw out any potential Gyaradoses the opponent has in the back, and therefore giving your Metagross a potential to possibly sweep. With that in mind, I would also recommend buddy boosting the Gyarados on your team. That way you would have a slight advantage against the opposing Gyarados in a mirror match. For better coverage against Magnezone, you can run the team with Excadrill in place of the Metagross, and if you start seeing a lot of double water backlines, potentially swap the Steel type out for the Snorlax, because Snorlax is going to be a very solid safe swap. Alright, now the next team is the one I am probably the most excited about because look at this team. It gets all A's on PvPoke. It is, like I said, it is going to be weak to Magnezone, but I really want to use this team. I have a feeling Florges Double Water is going to be so solid. So this team, I have a few recommendations in place of Golisopod. The team I want to recommend here is Florges, Golisopod, and Gyarados. However, I could also swap the Golisopod for Annihilate. This is another team recommendation here. And we can check. That's also going to be very good. It's going to be A for coverage, A for bulk, A for safety, B for consistency with the Annihilate. And then also you can swap the Annihilate out for Feraligatr. And Okay, we'll do that. Florges for Alligator Gyarados. If you have that team, I feel like that's going to be really solid, and I envy anyone who has the Feraligatr. I think Shadow Feraligatr would be better than the normal Feraligatr. But yeah, I think this would be such a good team. Again, look at this. All A's. So clearly the biggest weakness for this team is going to be that Magnezone. So if you're seeing a lot of Magnezones, you probably don't want to run this combination. But like I said, you can swap that second Pokemon out for something else. Again, Florges and Gyarados core is going to be very strong. You can have that second Pokemon be your Annihilate like we saw earlier, and also you could potentially put Hippowdon on the team in that second slot. However, if you have Hippowdon on the team, then you are going to be weak to both Avilugs, both Hisuian Avilug and the normal one. I would like to run Florges with a ground type. I feel like Florges and a ground type would be a really good combination. However, you just have to watch out for that Avilug. If you do run it that way, then I would recommend having the Waterfall on the Gyarados instead. And then you would use the Hippowdon actually as your safe swap instead of the Gyarados. The idea behind the team is Florges with 2 answers to Steel types in the back. You know that Metagross is going to be Florges' biggest weakness, and the 2 water types, or let's say a water type and an Annihilate, or a ground type and a water type, that is going to be doing really well against the Metagrosses, the Excadrills, and also Florges is going to be taking care of the dragon type weakness that the 2 Pokemon in the back will have. So I feel like there's a lot of synergy between these Pokemon. I know I recommended a lot of different Pokemon for that second slot, but the one I am going to be trying is going to be Golisopod and Gyarados in the back. So really looking forward to trying this one, and I think this is going to be a team that is also going to be performing really well, not only on paper, but in practice. Alright, this next team that I think could be really interesting is Hisuian Avilug lead with Golisopod and Annihilate in the back. And I think this could be interesting because you have something in the front that is going to be good against the dragon types or the flyers, and then 2 things in the back that are going to be weak to flyers. You have Golisopod and Annihilate. Avilug is not going to be doing well against Metagross, and then the 2 Pokemon in the back are going to be covering Metagross pretty well. Golisopod is going to have that Shadow Claw and that Liquidation for the Metagross, and Annihilate is going to have the Shadow Ball and the Night Slash for that Metagross as well. So I feel like there could be a really nice combination here. Again, Avilug is going to be taking care of flyers, dragon types. Also, it's going to be doing pretty well against the fairy types, which Annihilate is going to be very weak against, and it's also going to be doing good against the Skeleturge. Now let's take a look at the rating here. A for coverage, A for bulk, B for safety, and A for consistency. And I want to see if there's any glaring weaknesses. I know Snorlax is going to be a little bit tricky to deal with, but it's manageable. As long as you don't let that superpower land on your Avilug, then you should be fine. I didn't put the other Avilug, the normal one, because the team is already kind of weak to Skeleturge, and if you put the other one, the Ice type one, on the team on the lead, then you are going to be ABA weak to that Skeleturge. And also Golisopod is going to be struggling a little bit against Skeleturge if you can't land those liquidations. So let's see what the biggest weakness is. There are no glaring weaknesses for this team. Actually, Golisopod is going to be the biggest weakness, but I wonder how many people are actually going to be running those Golisopods. Gyarados is going to be good against the backline, but again, you have that Hisuian Avilug to take care of it. Again, Goodra also, you can take care of it with Hisuian Avilug. You can also take care of Goodra with Annihilate, so I wouldn't say Goodra is a big threat. For Dragonite, you can draw it out with your safe swap, which is going to be Golisopod, and Golisopod is going to be able to hit for neutral with those aerial aces and the Shadow Claws. Again, Magnezone is going to be a little bit of an issue for the team because you are ABA weak to it, but you know, you just try to deal with it. If you see it, it's unfortunate. You're not going to be able to win against everything, but I like that this team doesn't have like one really standout weakness. It is pretty decent and pretty balanced, I would say, against the entire meta. Another team we could look at is Mamoswine lead with Dragonite and Gyarados in the back. Again, this one gets all A's, but the problem with this is that it has a lot of glaring weaknesses. It is going to be very weak to that Florges, and also it is going to be very weak to Avalugg and Hisuian Avalugg, and also Primarina. So you could swap that Mamoswine out or Metagross, and then that should take care of all of those weaknesses. Metagross is going to be very good against the fairy types, and then you can use Gyarados as your safe swap to draw fairy types out, or even ice types like the Hisuian Avalugg out, and then the idea would be that your Dragonite could sweep whatever your opponent has in the back. Of course, if they're running a double fairy backline, which I don't think is going to be very common this time around, then that's just unfortunate, but I think with Metagross on the lead, Metagross Double Dragon, basically, it is going to be a very solid team, and I think this is already a very common Master League Premier team. This is definitely not an original creation. A lot of people have used this in the past, and it's worked pretty well, I would say. Alright, are you guys ready for another team that gets all A's? It is going to be Gyarados lead with Avalugg and Snorlax in the back. And actually on this team, I would say you could swap the Hisuian Avalugg out for the normal Avalugg. Now, the idea is you have that Gyarados on the lead, which is going to take care of fighters, which your backline is going to be very weak against. On this team, your safe swap is going to be Snorlax, and Gyarados and Snorlax are going to have very good coverage against Metagross, which the Avalugg is going to be extremely weak to. But this team is very bulky, which is why I liked it. And even though it gets all A's on PvPoke, it has a very glaring weakness, and that is going to be Magnezone. Again, if you're seeing a lot of Magnezones, I would highly recommend not running this team. But aside from Magnezone, you will perform really well with this because I think this has really nice coverage for the entire meta, except Magnezone. Again, we don't talk about Magnezone, but you know, it's there. If you see it, you're gonna lose, most likely. And if you can't land a superpower from that Snorlax, then you're definitely gonna lose. I should say that with this combination of Pokemon, you can probably get away with running Waterfall on that Gyarados, and then you'll have better coverage for Magnezone, although the team is still very weak to it. But that's because your backline is going to have enough coverage for those Dragon Breath users, so the Gyarados can get away with running Waterfall. The next team I think could be really interesting is Florges, Skeledirge, and Snorlax. Snorlax is going to be your safe swap, and this team gets all A's except for safety on PvPoke. However, as we've seen, this doesn't really mean much because, again, we need to see if the team has any glaring weaknesses. The biggest weakness PvPoke is giving me is the normal types, so Snorlax and Ursaluna. Let's take a look actually at the potential threats. Yeah, Ursaluna, Rhyperior, and Snorlax, but I think you can still take care of all three of these Pokemon with what you have on the team. Again, with this composition, you have that Fairy type on the lead, and you have two things in the back that are going to be very solid answers for Steel types, which the lead is obviously going to be very weak to. Also, with Snorlax as your safe swap, I have to say it's probably the best safe swap in all of Master League Premier because a lot of people are not going to be prepared for it, or they won't have the most solid answer to it. Now, Annihilate is in the meta now. Before, a lot of people didn't use the fighters because they were not that great. Annihilate is a lot better, so I don't know how often we will be seeing Annihilate, but Snorlax as a safe swap should be pretty solid all around. If your opponent doesn't have the best answer to it, then the Snorlax has the potential to flip the swap-ins. Ideally, you would try to save shields for Skeledirge, but if you absolutely must win switch, like let's say the lead is a Steel type and you really need to align that Skeledirge to the Steel type, then you can go ahead and invest a shield on your Snorlax. I think there was another really popular team with Gyarados in place of the Skeledirge, so it was Florges, Gyarados, and Snorlax. I do recall a lot of people using this team the last time Master League Premier was around, and a lot of them got to Legend with it. So if you want another really solid team composition, I would highly recommend that one, but I can't remember quite who popularized that team, so I'm sorry if I haven't given the proper credit here. And finally, last but not least, how could I not include this team in this video? But this is the most standard Master League Premier team you could possibly run. It is Dragonite Double Sealed. Dragonite, Excadrill, and Metagross. Excadrill is going to be your safe swap, and I have run this team into the ground in Master League Premier and in Open Master League because this is a pretty viable team in Open Master League as well. So you're going to have that Dragonite on the lead with 2 Steel types in the back to take care of the fairies. And this team gets a rating of A for coverage, A for bulk, C for safety, and A for consistency. It is a little bit on the squishier side because of how squishy Excadrill is. But as for glaring weaknesses, Feraligatr, yeah, which is new in the meta, is going to be pretty bad for that backline. But I would say, even though PV Poke says that Feraligatr is a potential threat, I think you can still beat it with a Dragonite. Especially if you're running Shadow Dragonite, then you should be good against that Feraligatr. As long as you shield those Ice Beams, you should be in a good position. And if you have to, I guess you could catch an Ice Beam on a Steel type, but it could get really dicey if you catch the Ice Beam on a Metagross, and then your opponent, if they have another answer to Metagross in the back, that could be not great. But you swap in the Excadrill and you draw out the water type if your opponent is not running double water, but I am predicting a lot of double water backlines, so we'll have to see how that goes. I think this team is still pretty solid overall. Primarina is also going to be a little bit tricky, but I mean, let's be honest, I've beaten a lot of Primarinas with this team in the past, so I wouldn't say that's a big weakness for the team. But if you want the most standard team you can run, the most straightforward team you can run, it is going to be Dragonite, Excadrill, and Metagross. And that is going to be the last team I have for you guys. I can't wait to see how these are going to perform. I'm going to be trying most of these out myself, except for the ones where I don't have the Pokemon for it. So I don't have Feraligatr and I don't have that Snorlax, unfortunately, so I can't run those. But everything else I have, and I will be trying myself. I hope you guys found this video informative, and I'm really hoping that these teams are going to work out. Again, I really don't like recommending teams without having tried them first. But I was really excited about Master League Premier coming back, and I really wanted to share my ideas with you guys. Again, if I find a team when I start actually battling that works really well for me, you guys know I'm going to share that with you immediately. If you guys like my content, please consider subscribing, maybe leave a like, it helps me out so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!